Are your students so irresponsible that you struggle to teach them? Are you constantly running out of time because your students just can't get organized or keep up with their stuff? Does your 30-minute lesson turn into a 60-minute ordeal because the kids are so unfocused and distracted? What is the solution? Well, the solution is strong systems and procedures. In this video, you will learn how to build in more structure and spend less time on confusion and transitions and more time on learning. Watch now. Okay, systems and procedures is probably the most essential thing you can do in your classroom. It is just because if you don't have great systems and procedures, forget about adding in any rigor, forget about building a positive culture and all of those things. You almost can't do anything unless you have procedures and systems. And like I said before, if you've taught for more than an hour, you realize the need for systems and procedures in your classroom. Okay, so the most basic of your systems and procedures is to establish some norms with the students. We call them norms. We used to call them rules, but instead of calling rules, kind of sounds like, it's more teacher-centered. And remember how we're talking about high-risk learners. Some of them have problems with authority. You are the authority, but you don't need to make that felt all the time, right? And the more buy-in you get from the students, the more student-centered the classroom is, the better off you're going to be because they're going to willingly participate in this collaborative culture. Okay, so norms are different from rules because ideally, this is what I recommend you do. I recommend you sit down at some point and you start writing down things you want to see. This is what I do when we need to have a classroom reset or something like that. What kind of things do you want to see in your classroom? If you're a new teacher, you might struggle a little bit. Just put what you imagine. You might want to get with your neighbor teachers and see what they say. But if you've already been in this classroom and you already know you want to reset or you just don't like how it's going and you want to change that. So sit down by yourself with some paper and start writing down the things you want to see. I want students sitting in their desk. I don't want anything flying through the room. I want them to raise their hand if they have a question. I want fighting to stop. Whatever you're going to make a whole list of things that you want. I want to see smiling kids. I want participation and hands raised. I want everything that you want to see. Write it down. And then what you're going to do is you're going to have to condense those, okay? Try to condense them into 10 or less. If you can make 6 or something like that, that's a really good manageable number, but definitely no more than 10 because you will not, that's a lot. 10's even a lot, but I can see. So try to condense them as much as you can and turn them into something positive, okay? So don't say any don'ts, don't say any no's, just turn it to something positive. So if it's like no throwing things, instead of saying no throwing things, you usually say hands, feet, keep hands, feet, and objects to yourself. That's kind of how we sum that up, which means, don't hit anybody, don't pull their hair, and don't throw things. So keep your hands, feet, and objects to yourself. Raise your hand when you have a question. Respect the speaker. Just all kinds of, you can look them up. You can look up norms and rules, but keep them positive and keep them 10 or under, okay? And it's going to be specific for every classroom, and it's totally adjustable, okay? If you make a norm and it never comes up or you don't need it, probably what's going to happen is you're going to realize you need another norm or a different norm. Throw it in there, add it. You're just going to train your kids, okay? And then when you start class, every day, go through the norms. I'll make a more detailed video on how to do your class reset and what to do with those norms, but you're going to start with the norms. You've got to establish it, have the kids sign it, that's like a contract, and then you work through those. Okay, the second important piece for establishing systems in your classroom is to really think about your seating arrangement. The old-fashioned single kids in rows, that's the old way to do it because it's much easier. I'm not going to lie. It's much easier to control kids that way. They're not facing each other. It's not easy for them to talk. They've got to turn them. You can put somebody behind them and then it's really obvious when they turn around to talk. So it's easier to have control. However, it's not a collaborative situation. You might move them like that for testing day. But you really want, like I said, you want to build the relationships in the room. You want the kids to collaborate. You want there to be talking in the room when they're supposed to be talking, not all the time. You've got to be able to, so basically the teacher's going to control that environment. So when it's time to talk, They're in a place where they can talk quickly. You don't have to move chairs and shuffle everybody around because that wastes time. Remember, we don't have time to waste. But when it's time to be quiet, they have to respect the rules and do those things. Okay, so ideally you would have them in groups, maybe groups of 4. Those seem to work well. You're going to have to really think that out. Don't give them an ABC order around the room because probably 2 friends are going to be together. So really think it out and mix it up. Don't put all your low kids, your low performing kids in a group and all your high performing kids in a group. You could do that sometimes for lower grades for reading when you're calling them or something like that, but that's just a disaster usually because the high kids are going to be done fast, the low kids are not even going to start, and they're not going to know what to do. They're going to need all this. So don't do that. I would put it, but sometimes I'll put like a mixed group. So I'll spread out your highs, spread out your lows, and then sprinkle your middles around the middle, around the extra. Okay, that's what I generally do. You can seat them boy girl or not. You can always adjust it. You don't have to break up friends, if they like sitting next to each other, because sometimes that's a good leverage. Sometimes they work well together, and you can say, okay, if you like where you're sitting, make sure we're following all the norms, right? So think that out. If the groups of 4 don't work, at least you could do partners at some point so that they do have a neighbor to collaborate with, because they learn better when they're able to turn and talk to their neighbors. Okay. But put a lot of thought into your seating arrangement and write it out on paper. And if you have a sub ever, make sure you leave that plan because they should stay there with the sub. Okay, the third point is your routines. Think about, if you're doing a reset or if you're a new teacher, again, sit down with that paper and think about every routine that's going to happen in that class that kids need to do. What is the procedure for sharpening my pencil? Am I allowed to sharpen my pencil? What kind of pencil sharpener can I use? Do I need to bring a pencil to class or 2? Should I have a pencil bag with me? Does it go in my binder? What is the homework procedure? Do I have a folder for class or a notebook? How do we turn in homework? Do we drop it in the bin? Do we pass it back? Do we correct it first? Do we grade our own? Think about every single thing that's going to be a routine. If they have an interactive notebook, where is that kept? Are you going to keep them in a box over there? Do you need a helper to pass them out? So don't leave it up to them to figure these things out themselves. You've got a lot of kids in there. The more tight your procedures and routines are, the better your class is going to run. It shouldn't take, I've seen a lot of classes and you walk in like, okay, get out your notebook, shuffle, shuffle, slam, slam, walk around, walk. It takes them 10 minutes to get out their notebook because some have it in the backpack, some have it in the desk, some have it in the corner. Some of them don't know where it is, and some of them leave it at home and throw it in the trash. It's just a big mess. So you want to have tight routines and procedures, and you want to hold the kids to it. So do it slowly at the beginning. Take the extra time up front to make sure those routines are going well. I'm going to wait. I'm waiting for 3 to get out their notebooks. Because you don't want this to go on. Some people, it goes on all year long because they never tighten up that procedure, and it's probably just because they don't realize you don't have one. There is not a procedure. We are assuming these kids are able. Remember those skills we assume they have? Don't assume they know how to put their notebook somewhere safe and find it the next day. They don't have that routine or that procedure unless you teach it to them. Write down all of the routines and procedures that you have and then put your explicit routine how you're going to do it. Now, you don't have to take the first 2 weeks of school and explain every routine in order. I usually do it as the things come up. I tell them the routine. So somebody has to sharpen their pencil. Okay, you may sharpen it in the morning and the afternoon. That's when our pencil sharpening time is. If you sharpen it in the middle, you got to have a little hand one that doesn't bother anybody because it's too noisy. 1 at a time rule. I have a 1 at a time rule. You can get up. I'm not going to don't tell me you want a tissue. Get up and get a tissue. Get up and throw something away. Get up and sharpen your pencil, but only 1 at a time. So if there's somebody over there sharpening your pencil, you don't go until that person sits down, because then you have meetings and talks, and people break pencils on purpose to go. So that's kind of the rule that I have. So I will, as that comes up, the first couple of weeks of school, I'll remind the students what the routine is. You're not getting on to anybody because they're just learning it, right? And the better thing, if the kids have multiple teachers and you're able to get with all the teachers together and kind of normalize or systematize your routines, if both teachers have the same routine, that's really helpful, because sometimes, usually when I've taught, I'll have my way, I like doing it, and my neighbor teacher does it a different way. One thing was supplies. I like the kids to take care of their supplies, so I give them a space to where they can keep it. We had a system, but like a lot of my neighbor teachers, even in upper elementary, they like to take all the supplies and then dole them out as kids need them. And for me, I just didn't have time for that, and I wanted the kids to be responsible. Because then when you run out, who's going to buy more? I wasn't gonna necessarily buy more, because some kids will go through their pencils like, 1 a day or something like that, or multiple. So, but it helps if you can get on the same page with your team. For school leaders, that would help if you normalize some of those systems, because it's hard for the kids to remember. They might not be trying to break your rule, but it's different. If it's different in every class, it's going to be hard to remember. Okay? So all of your routines and procedures, make sure you've thought out how you want to see that happen. And if there's something that's happening in your class that you don't like people are screaming out answers, okay, pause. We need to revisit this routine. How is it we're supposed to ask questions? And then if you want them to raise their hand when they ask a question, but when they blurt, you answer their question, then you are unteaching them that norm that you just told them. Okay, and that's usually what happens. Decide how you want it to happen and then make sure it happens. Do not answer their question when they come up and get out of their seat and stand in front of you and ask the question. I need you to sit in your chair before you ask the question. They should go down and sit, because if they come up and you answer them, you just taught them to do it, right? And you forget. So you got to get it in your head and be consistent every single time. Eventually, they will stop coming up to you because you're not going to answer their question. Okay, so you need to stick on that rule, and you need to expect them to follow the rules. When they don't follow the norms, you have to pause and make sure it's happening. Maybe do a little retraining. Let's review this so that they internalize those. Okay, so those are the routines and procedures. The fourth idea is jobs. I find it very effective in a high-risk environment to assign jobs to the students, depending on your grade level. I know a lot of kindergarten, first grade teachers, they'll have like a whole list of jobs, and they rotate the jobs every day, and somebody's the line leader and somebody's the passer router. That's really effective, and mostly they like to do that. It also helps you with classroom management, discipline issues, because if it's my day to be the line leader, I don't want to mess up because I don't want to lose my job today, right? So the more fun things you give them, remember, the more things you can hold over their head if you need to. Sounds bad, but you probably won't need to. You'll get the better behavior all the time, okay? It's a little leverage there. For the upper grades, I don't have a big list, but there are some jobs. If you can give a kid a job, it really helps. Like, who's the Chromebook passer outer? Who's the timer kid who gets to stop and start the timer? That really helps me a lot, and the kids love to do that for some reason. Somebody who puts the lights out, you can have that helper. You can have the whiteboard cleaner helper. Just whatever you could use help with, your kids can do it. You can even have grading helpers sometimes. Grading is if you get some of your really good spellers, or they can grade your spelling test for you. Kids love to help. They really do. And it's a reward. It's really a reward for them to get to help. They know it's a privilege, because they know if they were not well behaved, you wouldn't be able to use them as a helper, okay? So really leverage that. Come up with some jobs that you really need help with. And you can even have them come, if your school allows you to do that, recess time, or they're part of their lunch, the end of their lunch time. They could eat lunch with you and be your helper, or they could be an after-school helper, something, I don't know, during their specials period if they're allowed to come. This is a reward, and it also helps you to build and establish the relationship with those kids. That's a chance to be one-on-one, have one-on-one conversations with just those students. Okay, and finally, reflecting and adjusting. Like we just said, if the norms aren't working, you need to go back and revisit those and say, how are they working now? And you might not, most of the time teachers just get into the routine, they get into the system, and they'll get frustrated, and they don't really stop to analyze why. Because a lot of times, you don't need me to tell you why. You just need to pause and think for a minute. Okay, why is my class crazy today? People are blurting, people are running around the room. Why are they doing that? They just started doing it, and I keep telling them to sit, but they don't listen. But then, if you think about it, you'll realize, when they come up to me, I do answer their question. Or when they're in the next class, that teacher, maybe that teacher's been out and they have a permanent sub, and the kids are don't have norms all of a sudden, and maybe that's bleeding over into your class. So just sit and analyze the problem, and then you're reflecting, and then make adjustments. Okay, if your norms aren't cutting it, and then maybe you put up your norms at the beginning of the year, and there they have stayed all year looking pretty on your wall, and you never went back to revisit those. You never talk about the norms with the kids. You never call their attention to the norms. Maybe they're great norms, but they're not great if you write them up there and leave them. You have to keep reviewing those. Review them every morning. Call out the specific norm as soon as water bottle's on that, and everybody says floor, and they'll read the last thing. And so everybody knows, oh yeah, let me put my water bottle on the floor. Especially if you see more than one kid doing it, and you call out that norm and have the kids read it for you, they know what the norms are. Well, they should know what the norms are. If you did it once at the beginning of the year, they probably don't know what those norms are. So this routine is reflect and adjust. And I would say, like most things, don't just count on yourself. Okay, when I feel the need, I'll remember to go back. You're probably not going to remember to pause and revisit. So you should put it on your calendar. maybe once a month, review norms, see how they're going. How am I feeling about my class routines? How are the conversations going in my classroom? Do I need to readjust those things? So put it on your calendar, time to reflect and adjust all of your systems and routines. Okay, so that was part 4 of creating your positive and effective classroom culture, about systems and routines. Okay, that ends our series on building the positive collaborative culture. Don't forget to check out the next series on how to build rigor, and we're going to break that down into the steps a little bit more deeply. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that I can make for you, anything you need to know, anything that would help you in teaching high-risk learners, or any learners, but specifically we like to talk about high risk because they tend to be more challenging. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see. Give me a thumbs up if this video has helped you at all, and please subscribe to be notified for any new videos. Don't forget to check out the umbrella video, which is the simple formula for high achievement. And this has been Flip Your Classroom. I'll see you in the next video.